She walked into the Good Morning America studio like she owned the air around her, poised, elegant, and perfectly in control. Meghan Markle's smile was the kind that cameras loved, warm, flawless, and carefully measured. Dressed in an ivory pantsuit tailored to perfection, she carried herself with a mix of Hollywood glamour and the grace expected of a former royal. Crew members straightened when she passed. She thanked the makeup artist, complimented the flowers on set, and even laughed at a producer's joke. But underneath, there was something else. A faint glimmer in her eyes, unreadable but there. The studio buzzed with its usual live show chaos, producers in headsets darting around, makeup brushes flying, coffee cups clutched like lifelines. Michael Strahan, calm and collected, sat in the green room reviewing the rundown. He'd interviewed presidents, athletes, actors, but today's guest carried a unique mix of public intrigue and controversy. Officially, she was here to promote her new wellness documentary. Unofficially, the air was thick with expectation. This could be one of those interviews. At 8:17 a.m., the red light above camera 3 came alive. The studio audience leaned forward. Michael smiled into the lens. "Good morning, America. We have a very special guest today. Meghan Markle is here to talk about her latest work, her new documentary, and life beyond the spotlight." "Meghan, welcome back." "Thank you, Michael," she replied smoothly. "It's always a pleasure." The first few minutes were easy, scripted, safe. Wellness, motherhood, community work. Meghan spoke with polished confidence, layering words like authenticity, healing, and growth. The cameras loved her. But then Michael glanced at his notes, and his tone shifted, just slightly. "So, Meghan," he began, "you've worn many hats, actress, activist, member of the royal family. Looking back at your acting career, did it prepare you for the public scrutiny that came later?" For half a second, nothing changed. Then, a subtle narrowing of her eyes. "Well, I think it's reductive to focus on my acting when there's so much more to who I am now, Michael." Michael nodded. "Of course. But don't you think those early roles shaped how people perceive you today?" She let out a clipped laugh. "Perception is interesting. People believe what they're told. Especially by the media." In the control room, a producer muttered into her headset, "Uh-oh, tension's rising." Michael leaned in just a touch. "Fair point. But I'd argue interviews like this give people a chance to hear directly from you." Meghan's smile tightened. "I suppose, if the questions are thoughtful." A silence lingered, not long, but long enough for viewers at home to feel it. Michael, ever steady, moved on. "There's been speculation about your relationship with the press. Some say it played a role in the breakdown between you and the royal family. Looking back, would you say that's fair?" That was the question. The one that cracked her composure. Meghan leaned back, crossing her legs with deliberate slowness. "That's an oversimplification. I left because I wanted peace. Because I wanted my children to grow up where their mother isn't dissected on national television. Ironically, here I am again." Michael raised an eyebrow. "And yet, you've chosen to remain very public. Documentaries, podcasts, interviews like this. Some might say you stepped out of one spotlight only to create another." The air in the studio shifted. Meghan's smirk was icy. "Are you suggesting that speaking on my own terms is the same as being hounded by tabloids?" "Not at all," Michael said evenly. "Just pointing out the transition wasn't exactly a retreat from attention." The camera pushed closer, catching every flicker of emotion. "Unlike tabloids," Meghan said, her tone sharpening, "I get to choose the narrative. That's something you might not understand unless you've lived it." Michael didn't flinch. "I'd argue that as someone who's worked in both journalism and professional sports, I understand the pressure of public perception better than most." A small pause, but it wasn't silence. It was the sound of live television teetering on the edge of something electric. In that pause, the audience felt the shift. This was no longer just an interview. It was a duel wrapped in politeness, a battle fought with posture and tone. Meghan sat tall, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Michael held her gaze without blinking. And in living rooms across the country, millions of viewers leaned forward, sensing they were watching the precise moment when a carefully controlled media appearance turned into one of the most dissected segments in morning television history. The moment lingered in the air, heavy and electric, two professionals locked in what felt less like a conversation and more like a silent duel. Michael Strahan sat forward slightly, his posture unchanging, his tone steady as he shifted gears. "Let me ask you this," he began, his voice smooth but deliberate. "Do you think your departure from royal duties had anything to do with your past, your upbringing, your Hollywood career? Did any of that clash with the expectations of the crown?" Meghan didn't blink. Her expression didn't waver. "If you're asking whether I was too American for the monarchy," she said with deliberate precision, "the answer is yes, and I wear that like a badge of honor." A few members of the audience let out quick, uneasy laughs, the kind of chuckles that weren't sure if they were meant to be heard. Michael's polite smile didn't move, but his eyes locked on hers, studying. "And has that cultural clash," he continued carefully, "affected your current relationship with Prince Harry, for example?" Her tone cooled instantly, each word clipped. "My marriage is not a topic for public entertainment, Michael. I came here to discuss serious work, not indulge tabloid fantasies." "No disrespect meant," Michael replied, keeping his voice even, his hands still on the cue cards. "But people are curious. You and Prince Harry have been seen as icons of change, and part of that story is how you support each other through it." "Icons," Meghan repeated, almost tasting the word. "Or targets." The word dropped like a stone. No humor. No softening. The studio was suddenly still. Camera operators froze mid-shift, boom mics steadied in the air. The crew knew they were standing on the edge of something volatile. "I suppose it depends on who you ask," Michael said at last. "Some say you've reshaped public narratives. Others believe you've blurred the lines between privacy and publicity. And some," Meghan replied, her voice flat and unyielding, "simply like to hear themselves talk." The control room reacted like a spark had hit dry grass. A producer shot up from her chair. "Did she just say that?" she hissed, eyes glued to the monitors. Michael, unmoving, leaned back slightly with a thoughtful nod. "Well, I hope I'm asking questions our viewers care about." "And I hope," Meghan shot back, folding her arms with deliberate finality, "they care about things that matter, like mental health, education, and equity. Not whether or not my marriage is tabloid-worthy." Michael's smile tightened, but he didn't break. "So, let's dig into that then. If you're open to it." It was civil on the surface, but the lines were drawn now, thinly veiled but sharp enough to cut. The air in the Good Morning America studio felt heavier, pressing down like a storm cloud. Michael shifted in his chair, still every inch the seasoned broadcaster, the practiced polish intact. But his eyes carried something harder now. Not anger, not irritation, but resolve. Live TV resolve. The kind that meant he wasn't going to retreat. Meghan's body language had shifted as well. She no longer leaned forward in engagement. She reclined, at ease, almost imperious. One hand absently toyed with the corner of a cue card resting on the side table, as if she owned the set. Michael cleared his throat, his tone cool. "Meghan, I appreciate your candid thoughts on the media. But let's pivot. Something a lot of viewers are curious about, your transition from acting into royal life. Do you feel Hollywood prepared you for Buckingham Palace?" Meghan blinked, just once, as though weighing her words. Then the smile returned, thinner now, with a trace of frost. "You mean, do I think playing a paralegal on Suits helped me sit next to the Queen? No, Michael. I wouldn't say it was preparation. That's a rather silly comparison, don't you think?" Michael didn't look away. "Not at all. Plenty of people make career leaps. But I imagine there must have been parallels, managing public scrutiny, balancing personal expression with public duty." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "I think what you're really asking, Michael, is if I was ever worthy of the role." "No," he replied without hesitation. "I'm asking if your previous experiences helped or hurt the transition, and whether you feel you were prepared." She laughed then, but it wasn't warm. It was short, sharp, and entirely without joy. "Prepared? For a family that thought I was a prop in their historical drama? Let's just say no script could have prepped me for that." Behind the cameras, producers were already exchanging glances. The director, watching on the monitor, mouthed to his assistant, "Let it play." They knew exactly what they had on their hands now: viral gold. Michael slowly turned a page in his notes. Let's talk about the decision to step back from royal duties. There's been speculation that tensions weren't just with the press, but within the palace itself. Meghan's expression didn't harden, it shifted, subtly. The faintest flicker of irritation crossed her face. "Oh, here we go," she muttered under her breath. Michael's brow lifted at the remark, but he pressed on. "There were reports, unconfirmed of course, that some of those tensions involved your own behavior. That perhaps some people felt you weren't interested in adapting to the institution." From somewhere off camera came the sharp intake of breath from a crew member. Meghan didn't blink. "And I suppose you're quoting those mysterious palace insiders, right? The ones who never show their faces but always have plenty to say." Michael let the silence answer for him, holding it in the air. Meghan's voice dropped lower now, deliberate. "Look, I know it's easy to paint me as the difficult one. People love that narrative, especially when it involves a woman. Especially a woman of color. But let me ask you something, Michael. Would you be asking these same questions if your guest were a man who had married into the monarchy?" Michael's face didn't change. "I ask every guest the questions the public wants answers to. That's my job." "And yet," Meghan replied with a slow, condescending smile, "you keep circling the same implication that somehow I caused my own problems." Michael glanced down, flipped a card with unhurried precision. "Is that not a possibility?" The words hung there, heavy enough to make the studio lights feel hotter. The smirk that had been playing at the corners of Meghan's mouth vanished like a light switched off. "I think we both know what kind of interview this really is," she said, her voice cutting through the charged air like ice water. "You're not here to learn about me. You're here to chip away at me. Politely, of course, with a smile. But a chisel is still a chisel." Michael's eyes didn't leave hers. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, the kind a poker player might offer when dealt a challenging hand. "I respect your point of view," he said evenly, "but let me ask one more question." "Just one." Meghan folded her arms, her posture closing in like a fortress door. "Go on." "Your relationship with Prince Harry," Michael began, choosing each word with surgical precision, "has been the subject of a lot of speculation lately. Some tabloids have reported recent tension, separate travels, public disagreements. Care to comment?" Meghan let out a laugh, short, sharp, and devoid of warmth. "I'd prefer not to entertain tabloid trash, Michael. If your questions are going to be based on supermarket headlines, perhaps you should be the one playing a paralegal." The line landed like a punch. Somewhere behind the cameras, a sound tech winced. A stage manager's pen stopped moving mid-note. Michael blinked once, and then he smiled, a smile without the glossy warmth of morning television, the kind that said, "Now you've shown the world who you really are." "I ask about your marriage," he said quietly, "because your audience, the people who supported you, who rallied for you, are wondering if everything's okay. And if you don't want to answer, that's your right. But insulting the question doesn't make it go away." For the first time, Meghan shifted in her seat. The movement was small, but it broke her perfectly still composure. "You know," she said, her voice dropping into a lower, sharper register, "it's funny how people like to pretend they're being respectful while slipping in subtle digs. You've got it down to an art form, Michael. And you've perfected the art of avoiding accountability," he replied, still calm. "I am," she said flatly. The silence that followed seemed to stretch longer than the commercial breaks ever could. In the control room, the director's hand hovered in mid-air over the cut signal, unsure if breaking the moment would be genius or a mistake. Michael glanced down at his notes, but it was for show. He already knew his next move. "Let's talk about your production company. Are you planning to focus more on documentaries or scripted content?" But Meghan didn't bite. She sat there, arms still folded, eyes locked on him with the unblinking intensity of a chess player realizing they were several moves away from checkmate. "Meghan," he prompted gently. She blinked once. The mask slipped, just a fraction. "I think," she said slowly, "we should wrap this up." Michael nodded. "If that's your choice." But the air in the studio had shifted. Everyone could feel it. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. She angled her body slightly away from him now, legs crossing, chin tilting up in a gesture equal parts dismissal and defense. The gloves, though never visible, were off. Michael placed the cue cards down beside him. He didn't need them anymore. "Before we close," he said, tone light but laced with steel, "there's one more thing the audience has been buzzing about. Your recent public comments about the monarchy, especially calling it, quote, a dusty institution built on outdated ideals." Meghan tilted her head, eyes narrowing just a hair. "Is that really how you want to end this, Michael?" "You said it," he replied. "I'm asking if you still stand by it." "I said what needed to be said," she answered coolly. "Not everyone has the courage to speak out when something is wrong." Michael leaned in slightly. "But some would argue that you walked into an ancient system with your own expectations, and got upset when it didn't bend to you." Her expression hardened, the last traces of charm stripped away. "I walked into that system as a wife, a mother, a humanitarian. Not as someone looking to stage a coup. But when I saw what it did to my husband, to my mental health, I chose peace." "And the book deal?" Michael asked without blinking. "The docuseries? The Spotify contract? Were those about peace too?" The grenade was out of the bag now, pin long gone. A beat of silence followed, so thick it felt like the cameras might stop rolling on their own. "I'm not here to justify my existence or my choices," Meghan said finally, the veneer of control fraying at the edges. "I have a platform. I use it. Isn't that what you people always say? Use your voice." "Absolutely," Michael said. "But when that voice comes with millions of dollars in global exposure, it also comes with scrutiny. You don't get to opt out of that." "And who decided you get to lecture me about scrutiny?" she snapped. "I'm not lecturing," he replied. "I'm interviewing. Or at least, I was." No one behind the cameras moved. This was live television at its most combustible. "You've been towing the line this entire time," Meghan said, her voice tightening, "pretending to be fair while dragging up every hit piece written about me." "I didn't write those pieces," he said. "But I read them, just like your audience does. And now you're their mouthpiece." "No," Michael said simply. "But I'm not yours either." The pause that followed felt volcanic. Finally, Meghan drew in a sharp breath. "You know what I think? I think you had your narrative planned the moment I walked in. You wanted the viral clip, the sound bite. You don't care about my work or my truth. This was a setup." Michael's eyes didn't waver. "No, Meghan. This is an interview. The setup," he said, "is thinking you could come here and control it." Michael raised his brows. "And yet you walked into it." Her eyes flashed. "Because I believed this would be different. I thought you would be different." He shrugged. "Maybe you didn't do your homework." That was it. Meghan shifted in her seat, pulling her blazer tight across her chest as if shielding herself from the air itself. "I think we're done here," she said through her teeth. But Michael wasn't finished. "One last thing," he said, holding up a final card. "You said recently in a speech that the truth has no expiration date. Is that still your belief?" Meghan didn't look at him. "Play your clip, Michael. Get your moment." He didn't. He just stared at her, waiting. She stood without another word, heels clicking like a metronome, counting down the end of a very public unraveling. Michael remained in his chair, exhaling only when the sound of the backstage door clicking shut echoed faintly across the studio. The room was still. No one spoke until the floor director whispered, "We're out in 3, 2, 1. The screen faded to commercial. The studio was silent. You could have heard a pin drop beneath the soft hum of cameras. Michael Strahan, ever the seasoned host, sat cool as ice. Meghan leaned forward, visibly rattled, her perfectly composed image fraying. "Let's be honest," she said, brushing a strand of hair back. "There's only so much anyone can take of this interrogation." "You're free to answer or not answer any question, Meghan," Michael replied evenly. "But remember, this is live television, and you agreed to be here." She laughed dryly. "Oh, please. Don't act like this wasn't a trap. You invited me under the guise of promoting my work, then spent 20 minutes fishing for headlines about my husband and my past." "I asked about your career, your choices, your public journey," he said, clasping his hands. "You're one of the most talked-about women in the world. I'd be doing the audience a disservice if I didn't ask what they're already wondering." Her glare sharpened. "No, you'd be doing yourself a disservice by pretending you're Barbara Walters." Gasps rippled in the control room. The comparison wasn't just biting, it was meant to sting. Michael's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed smooth. "I don't pretend to be anyone, Meghan. I'm Michael Strahan, and I've earned my seat, just like you've earned yours." Her tone grew cutting. "Let's be real. If my name was still just Meghan Markle from Suits, you wouldn't even have me on this show. You'd be interviewing another quarterback." Michael smiled, not from amusement, but realization. "You might be right. But here's the difference. I'd still treat them with respect." That landed. Meghan blinked. Her lips parted as if to respond, but nothing came. She rose slowly, placing her microphone on the side table. "You know what? I don't have to stay here and endure amateur journalism dressed as morning fluff." "You're free to leave," Michael said calmly, "but walking out doesn't make your answers disappear." She adjusted her blazer, chin high. "And staying doesn't make your questions any less shallow." Without another word, she turned and left. The studio doors closed softly, but the moment hit like a slam. Cameras kept rolling. Michael stayed composed, then looked straight into the lens. "Live TV, folks. Sometimes you get inspiration. Sometimes you get confrontation. And sometimes you get someone walking out because they didn't like the questions." He smiled again, this time with steel behind it. "We'll be right back." The screen faded, but the clip didn't. By noon, it had gone viral. So, was Michael out of line for asking those questions? Or was Meghan simply too defensive for her own good?